Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Bangladesh is on edge with multiple cases of blast, arson and the capital Dhaka in lockdown. Tension is high ahead of the Hasina verdict. We'll bring you the latest on that. Also in focus, a warning from Pakistan that betrays how delusional their leadership is. They're talking of a two-front war with India and Afghanistan. In China, the slowdown is getting harder to ignore. Despite stimulus from Beijing and a deal with Trump, domestic consumption is not picking up. In the West, Europe is finally criticizing the US over the attacks on Venezuela. But it's vague and Washington clearly does not care. In Ukraine, a corruption scandal has rocked the Zelensky government. In Delhi, there's poison in the air and it's doing irreparable damage to your body. The science is scary. In South Korea, everything came to a standstill for what they call their do-or-die exam. In the US, the government shutdown is finally over, but the disruption continues. Also bringing you the very disturbing story of sniper tourism from the Bosnian War. Italy has opened an investigation. And why cases of high blood pressure have doubled in children in the last few years. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Moody's pegs India's growth at 7% for 2025. The financial services company projects that the Indian economy will grow at 6.5% in the next year. India remains the fastest growing G20 economy driven by strong demand and exports. Moody's says India has shown resilience despite global headwinds. The Danish government is hit in a wide-ranging cyber attack. Their defense websites have also been targeted. Pro-Russia hackers have claimed responsibility for this attack. On Wednesday, the same group had hit several Danish municipalities. Denmark is one of Ukraine's staunchest supporters. Chinese police issue bounties on two Taiwanese influencers. They're offering up to $35,000 for any help in arresting them. Beijing claims the pair disseminated anti-China content online. China considers Taiwan as part of its territory and has not ruled out using force to bring the self-ruled island under its control. Turkey suspends flights by its C-130 military cargo planes. Ankara says this is a precautionary measure. On Tuesday, a C-130 plane had crashed, killing all 20 people on board. Turkey has not said what caused the accident. The aircraft was purchased from Saudi Arabia in 2012 and modernized a decade later. And South Africa announces its plan to bid for the Olympics. They are aiming for the 2036 or 2040 Olympic and Paralympic Games. This would bring one of the world's biggest sporting events to Africa for the first time. South Africa was the first African country to host the Football World Cup in 2010. It was a tense Thursday in Dhaka. Very little traffic, very few people on the streets and a lot of police presence. Dhaka did not look like a bustling Asian capital city. It looked like a city under siege. Why? All because of a sham trial. The trial of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Her case is being heard by a special tribunal in Dhaka. Hasina and her ministers face charges of murder and genocide. If convicted, they could get the death penalty. And that conviction could come soon. Today, the tribunal set the date for her verdict. November 17 is the D-Day. That's the coming Monday. So the next couple of days will be very crucial. Expect tensions, protests, and maybe even violence. In fact, we're already seeing it. Overnight, 5 vehicles were torched in Dhaka. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Then today, the central office of the Awami League was attacked. The Awami League is the party of ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. A group of 15 people lit a fire inside the building. Elsewhere, the BNP office was also attacked. That's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, the party of Hasina's longtime rival Khaleda Zia. This party, the BNP, is touted to win the upcoming election in Bangladesh. And their office in Barishal was also burnt. Put together, dozens of such attacks have been reported, including blasts at around 17 locations. So who's behind them? The interim regime is blaming the Awami League. What a shocker. They've arrested at least 46 leaders in a nationwide hunt. They're blaming Sheikh Hasina's party for this. Which brings us to today. Security was beefed up across Dhaka. Police officers were deployed near the tribunal. The situation was tense but not violent. Only a handful of buses were seen on the streets. Private cars were virtually absent and schools were open but largely empty. In the evening, Interim leader Muhammad Yunus addressed the nation. He made two crucial statements. One, there will be a referendum in February. It will be held on the same day as the national election. And what will people vote on? Some proposed constitutional changes. If a majority vote for them, for those changes, they will be adopted. That's the first announcement. Secondly, Yunus called for unity. He asked the political parties to put aside their differences. He urged them to display a united front.
We have decided, after considering all the factors, that the referendum will be held on the same day as the next parliamentary elections. We should not tarnish the glory of the unity that the countrymen built by standing tall in the face of death against fascism in July 2024 by engaging in petty disagreements and trivial disputes.
That's the thing about Muhammad Yunus. He speaks like a statesman, but his actions, they're quite the opposite. Meanwhile, Yunus's chief rival is also speaking out. That's former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She fled to India in August last year after violent protests. In Delhi, Hasina has been largely silent. No interviews, no public appearances. She has lived the quiet life. But 15 months later, she is speaking out. Sheikh Hasina has given multiple interviews to the media, and she's spoken on a whole lot of issues. We'll focus on three of them. One, was there a foreign hand in the protests of 2024? That's a question that she's been asked and she's spoken about. Earlier, a letter had leaked. It was believed to have been written by Sheikh Hasina, and it did allude to American meddling. But she now says no, neither the US nor any other foreign power meddled in 2024.
We have always had good relationships with successive US administrations and have no reason to believe that the US government or other foreign powers were actively involved. President Trump, with whom I have very good relations, has publicly expressed his dislike of Yunus.
Secondly, what is Yunus's goal for Bangladesh? Hasina wanted a progressive, secular country. What does Muhammad Yunus want? Again, listen to what she said.
If Westerners think Yunus is a friendly face, they are being fooled. In fact, he is being used as the front man by the extremists in his administration, who are pursuing a sectarian, score-settling, and socially regressive domestic agenda.
She's right about that. Muhammad Yunus does appear to be a front. The real power lies with radical Islamist groups. And that's a flashpoint with India too. New Delhi has urged Dhaka to keep such elements in check to promote peace and secularism. But Yunus is going the Pakistan way. He's giving space to radical elements. Which brings us to the third point. Does Hasina hope to return to Bangladesh one day? She says yes, but she has some conditions.
The most important condition for my return to Bangladesh is the same condition that the Bangladeshi people require: a return to participatory democracy. The interim administration must rescind its ban on the Awami League and allow elections that are free, fair, and inclusive.
Dhaka is not happy with Sheikh Hasina. They have summoned the Indian envoy to protest these interviews. Chances are things will escalate further next week. Once Hasina is convicted, Yunus will turn to India. He will put more pressure on New Delhi to extradite Sheikh Hasina. Like I said, this is a tense period. More than 15 months have passed since the horrible events of July 2024. I'm sure the people are hoping to move forward, but Mohammed Yunus will not let them. His politics depends on reopening old wounds. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most delusional of them all? In geopolitics, there's only one answer: Pakistan. The country seems to possess a strange kind of delusional confidence. The kind where you talk about a two-front war when you're barely being able to keep the lights on. And who's leading the charge of this fantasy? Well, you guessed it right. It is Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif, a man known less for strategy and more for sound bites that defy logic. Normally, we wouldn't take him seriously, but his latest statement deserves a special mention. And I will read it out. This is what he said. We are ready for war on two fronts. We are ready. We are prepared to face both the eastern, that is India, and western border, Afghanistan. Allah helped us in round 1 and He will help us in round 2. Let me break down his statement. Khwaja Asif says Islamabad is ready for a two-front war. And what are these two fronts? India and Afghanistan. It would be amusing if it wasn't dangerous, because Asif did not stop at that. He said Allah helped us in round 1. So in round 2, He would help them too. Now what is this round 1 that he's talking about? Operation Sindoor, that's what he's referring to. Pakistan-backed terrorists killed 26 people, 26 civilians, mostly tourists, in India's Pahalgam. In response, India bombed terror camps in Pakistan. Pakistan continued to escalate tensions. India bombed their military bases. Finally, Pakistan had to sue for peace. They begged for a ceasefire through back channels. If Khwaja Asif thinks that this is winning round 1, we say congratulations to him. Also, here's the thing. India is not even Pakistan's biggest headache. It's the Taliban. It's a group that's Pakistan's own creation, a group that they armed, trained and nurtured for decades. Now it has come to haunt Islamabad. Leading the charge is the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, better known as the Pakistani Taliban. They're wreaking havoc in Pakistan. They're blowing up convoys. They're attacking police posts. Recently, a bomb blast killed 12 people in Islamabad. A TTP breakaway faction has claimed responsibility for the attack. But do you know who Pakistan is blaming? India, as usual. Here's what their Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting again. These attacks are a continuation of India's state-sponsored terrorism aimed at destabilizing Pakistan. But let's be honest. Khwaja Asif's war talk is not really about India or Afghanistan. It's about optics. It is about distraction, because right now the biggest war in Pakistan is not external, it is internal. A silent coup is underway in Islamabad. Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir is quietly redrawing the country's constitution. He is doing it through the 27th Amendment. It gives Asim Munir the power to control the armed forces and even the judiciary. How? Under the new title of Chief of Defence Forces. It grants him extensive powers. It seals his constitutional coup. Remember, Pakistan has seen 3 coups before. With Ayub Khan in 1958, Ziaul Haq 1977, Parvez Musharraf 1999. But this one, it's the most dangerous of them all because it comes disguised as reform. So when Khwaja Asif says Pakistan is ready for a two-front war, one can't help but ask, which two fronts exactly? Because from where India is standing, it looks like Pakistan is already fighting multiple wars. It is fighting an economic war with reality. Its reserves are barely enough for weeks of imports. It is fighting a political war. Elections are pre-scripted and opposition leaders are in jail. It is fighting a civil-military war where generals rule and civilians only pretend to. It is fighting a credibility war, one that it has long lost since on the global stage. So when Pakistan talks about a two-front war, maybe it should first try winning the one against itself. Because, and I repeat, right now their biggest enemy is not India, their biggest enemy is their own delusion. And no matter how many rounds Khwaja Asif claims to win, reality is not one of them. Now to China, which is showing more signs of trouble for the economy. Last month, Beijing had a truce with Donald Trump. This was after months of a heated trade war. And that deal, that truce, raised hopes of a recovery. But the slowdown in China has not eased. And the proof lies in China's shops and supermarkets. Consumer spending is still sluggish. It's been slow for more than 4 years now, and that makes it China's longest slowdown in household consumption. A full 4 years of weak demand. In simple terms, Chinese consumers are still holding back. They're not buying enough. This trend began right after the pandemic and it still continues. Beijing is expected to release new data this week. Early reports suggest another weak number. Retail sales in the month of October rose by just 2.8%. What does that mean? It means that retail sales were not very high. They track how much consumers spend. This includes everything that households buy, from your groceries to gadgets. And a rise in this number, in the retail sales number, usually signals strong demand. But in China, retail sales rose by just 2.8% last month. This is the weakest growth in over a year and the 5th straight month of slowdown. In September, the growth figure was 3%. That was already a 10-month low. So spending is not just slowing, it is stuck. Chinese households are not opening their wallets. And that's a problem that Beijing has not been able to fix. Also, it's not for lack of trying. Throughout 2025, throughout this year, China has rolled out cash incentives. They have extended subsidies to households. And the plan did work for a while. But it hasn't been enough to spur demand. Because the deeper problem here is that of confidence. People are saving more and spending less, perhaps because they're worried about the long term. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is trade. And on this front, China faces a different kind of slowdown. Last month, Chinese President Xi Jinping met US President Donald Trump. It was their first meeting in 6 years. And in this meeting, they agreed to a ceasefire, a one-year truce in their trade war. As part of this, they lifted restrictions on rare earths, they eased tariffs, and China agreed to buy more soybean from the US. This truce is holding for now, but the damage has already been done, a lot of it. Many Chinese firms lost orders in key markets in the United States. Take the case of one aluminium products maker. His company saw a 20% drop in revenue. Why did that happen? Because first, they lost consumers and customers in America. And second, they couldn't ramp up sales in other global markets. We're talking about markets in Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, West Asia. Orders from these other places could not make up for the fall of orders from the United States. And this could trigger a new risk for China. If domestic consumption remains weak, Chinese firms will turn to exports for recovery. And remember, they already produce more than what they can consume in China. So now if Chinese demand remains weak, they will want to sell more elsewhere. That means Chinese products could flood overseas markets. And that could lead to more trade tensions for China, especially with those countries who want to cut back on Chinese products, who want to buy less from China. In fact, China tried to address this challenge earlier this year. It expanded a trade-in program for households. And the idea here was quite simple. Replace your old fridge, phone or microwave and the Chinese state will give you a cash rebate. Some families even got money to upgrade smart toilets. The scheme was wildly popular. Some provinces ran out of money early. The central government had to step in with more funds. And sales of household items did surge, which was good news. But such schemes may not help in the long term, because how often would you replace your fridge? And that means fewer customers next year, fewer sales, and a higher risk of a renewed slump. This is where China's slowdown runs deeper. It points to a structural problem. For years, China prioritized its factories. It poured investment into manufacturing. But it did far less to support household demand. And the result is this: strong supply and weak spending. For any recovery, demand needs to grow. But Beijing has relied on short-term fixes. It is focused on factory output, not raising incomes or creating stable jobs. And now the cracks are starting to show. So what does it look like for 2026? How is the Chinese economy poised for the next year? It looks uncertain. Retail sales could fall below pre-subsidy levels. Export markets remain shaky. The property crisis has not eased. And Chinese citizens are less confident to spend. So China may be the factory of the world, but right now it is struggling to sell to its own people. It's an early Christmas miracle. American allies are criticizing Washington. Don't pinch yourself, it is true. For a change, the Europeans are not fawning over the United States. They're actually questioning US actions, specifically the moves in Venezuela. As we speak, the G7 foreign ministers have gathered in Canada. Their main focus is on Gaza and Ukraine, but some of the ministers also raised Venezuela. Some quick context here. The US has been targeting Venezuelan boats in the Caribbean. They have hit 19 boats. They've attacked 19 Venezuelan boats and killed 76 people. Plus, a lot of US firepower has been deployed. 1 aircraft carrier, 15,000 soldiers, and around 9 American warships. All of this has been done without global sanction, without getting the world, or at least America's so-called allies, on board. So no proof, no trial, and no UN vote, just American strikes and threats. It started in September this year. For close to 2 months, Europe was silent, but finally they're speaking out. The French foreign minister said this before the G7 started. We have observed with concern military operations in the Caribbean region because they disregard international law and because France has a presence in this region through its overseas territories. That's a strong statement from France. They say US actions disregarded international law. The European Union's top diplomat also criticized Washington. She says the strikes are unjustified. The UK too has joined in. Reports say they have stopped sharing intelligence with the United States. The UK has around 4 islands in the Caribbean. They collect a lot of intelligence from those outposts. None of that intelligence will now be shared with Washington. I know this sounds like a big deal, almost like a rebellion against Washington. But the US Secretary of State couldn't care less. That's Marco Rubio. He says nobody at the G7 raised this issue with him.
Secretary, I was told by the European representative on foreign policy, Callas, that it was discussed, the Venezuela military operations were discussed.
Not with me. No one raised it. I mean, no one in the meeting raised it.
Raised in meetings.
Not with me. They didn't raise it with me. They may have raised it among themselves, but they all came now from CELAC or whatever they were at. But it didn't come up once in any of the gatherings that we had, either last night or today.
Couple of things to note here. One, Europe is talking around the US. Yes, they have criticized and questioned the strikes, but they're not talking directly to Washington. So basically, these are just public remarks They don't feature in bilateral conversations. That's point number one. And two, even if they do feature in conversations, America doesn't care.
I don't think that the European Union gets to determine what international law is. They certainly don't get to determine is how the United States defends its national security. The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco-terrorists in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country.
Not surprising. Europe had similar concerns about the Iraq war, but in the end it made no difference whatsoever. The US invaded Iraq anyway. It's a classic case of Western double standards. Just think about it. Marco Rubio says Europe does not decide international law. He's right. But neither does America. Any military action must check two boxes. One, they must be backed by the United Nations, and two, they must have a proper justification, even if the first is lacking. You must at least check the second. You must at least have some justification. In this case, neither box is checked. Look at the data. 65% of drugs are seized at land crossings, 28% at airports, and only 5% at sea. So all this mobilization is to target 5% of America's drug problem. But sure, let's call it self-defense. The fact is, this is not about drugs at all. This is about the US trying to send a message, trying to reinvent its hegemony in Latin America. The question is, will anyone push back? I'm afraid Europe's words of criticism are not enough. If Ukrainian boats had been hit, Brussels would have acted tough. But these are Venezuelan boats. These are Venezuelan lives. So Europe is confined to making token criticism. And that is the big takeaway here. The West will talk a big game on international rules. They will shame you for not calling out others. They will sanction you. They will tariff you. But in their own backyard, this is what they do. It reveals the truth about our so-called rules-based order. The West imposes it, but never follows it. Now let's talk about Ukraine. It is fighting a war on two fronts, one against Russia and the second against corruption at home. And this week, the second front just got messier. A new corruption scandal is making headlines. It centers on Ukraine's energy sector, the same sector that is already under pressure by Russian strikes. Now it's also being drained from within. Investigators say they have uncovered a large illegal payment network. The amount? Around $100 million. A former deputy prime minister has been named. Senior energy officials have been suspended. An associate linked to President Zelensky is also under sanctions, and two ministers have resigned. The investigation is still unfolding. Our next report has more.
Ukraine is preparing for another winter under wartime conditions. Russian strikes have damaged parts of the energy grid. Blackouts have returned in several regions.
Crazy stuff in the last couple of months. Russian electricity is gone.
This is our, daily conditions, daily life.
Repair teams are working to restore substations and power lines. And in the middle of these challenges, a corruption scandal has shocked Ukraine. The investigation behind it began more than a year ago. Anti-corruption agencies monitored calls. They followed financial trails. They collected around 1,000 hours of recordings, and they carried out more than 70 raids. This week, they made their findings public. The case centers on Ukraine's energy sector. It focuses on contracts linked to Energoatom. Energoatom is the state nuclear power company. It supplies a major share of Ukraine's electricity. Investigators say a group of officials and businessmen took illegal payments from contractors. The alleged rate was 10 to 15% on key deals. The total amount involved is estimated at around $100 million. Officials say the funds were laundered through an office in Kiev and sent abroad. The list of suspects includes former officials, energy executives, and intermediaries. A former deputy prime minister has been named in the case. Several advisors and sector managers have also been identified. One of the most notable names is businessman Timur Mindich. He once co-owned a production company reportedly linked to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Investigators say he left Ukraine before the findings became public. The political fallout came quickly. President Zelensky asked the Justice and Energy ministers to resign. Both submitted their resignations on Wednesday. The Prime Minister then suspended several senior figures at Energoatom. Officials say these steps are meant to protect the investigation.
First of all, there should be maximum transparency in the energy sector, in all processes absolutely. I support every investigation by law enforcement bodies, by anti-corruption bodies. We support it. It is absolutely clear and the same for everyone position, no schemes.
After the resignations, the government imposed sanctions on Mindich and another businessman linked to the case. The measures include asset freezes and travel restrictions. For many Ukrainians, the announcement hit at a difficult time. Blackouts have returned as winter approaches. Families are coping with power cuts and unstable supplies. News of alleged theft from the energy sector has increased public frustration.
I think this is mostly a negative thing because while we have a war going on, we need to somehow unite, put all the money into defense. And here what's happening is that, on the contrary, money is being stolen and some kind of business is made from it.
International partners have also reacted. Germany has urged Kyiv to strengthen its anti-corruption efforts. For now, investigators say more information will be released in the coming days. Additional suspects may be identified as new recordings are examined. Ukraine's parliament still needs to vote on the minister's resignations. The courts will determine how far the scheme reached, and the final verdict will set the course for what comes next.
Here in Delhi, the story is all around us. You can see it, you can smell it, but apparently you can't do anything about it. We're talking about air pollution. Let's look at the numbers first. Delhi's AQI a short while ago was 417. AQI is the air quality index. It should ideally be below 100. In Delhi, it was 417. That's the average for the entire national capital. And the mornings appear to be the worst. At 7 a.m. today, the AQI was at 562. So Delhi's levels were more than 5 times higher than the recommended levels. And this affects everyone who lives and works here. Let me tell you what happened at the Supreme Court today. In the middle of the hearing, the topic of pollution came up. And here's what a judge said. I'm quoting. Situation is very, very serious. Why are you all appearing here? We have the virtual hearing facility. Please avail it. This pollution will cause permanent damage. That's how bad it is. The Supreme Court judges are asking lawyers to appear online. They fear that this pollution will cause permanent damage, and they're not wrong. This problem is not a once-in-a-lifetime issue. If you live in Delhi, you experience it every year. Imagine what that does to your lungs. It doesn't just cause cough or shortness of breath. It weakens your lungs internally. Here's how it works. Your lungs have hair-like structures called cilia. Their job is to filter out dust and germs. But what happens when there is too much dust? The cilia gets damaged. It's easier for germs to reach your lungs, meaning you become vulnerable to lung diseases. That is how air pollution hurts you. Beyond the lungs, it can affect your skin, it can affect your hormones, your fertility, your bones, your hair. Studies say Delhi's air could cut your lifespan by almost 10 years. But don't think you're safer elsewhere. Because, and listen to this, 93 of the world's 100 most polluted cities are in India. 93 out of 100 in India. 70 out of the 75 most polluted cities in the world are also in India. Clearly, this is a pattern. Yes, Delhi is the worst, but other Indian cities are not far behind, and it shows in the health data too. Policy Bazaar has studied insurance claims from across India, and here's what they found. Illnesses linked to pollution make up 8% of all claims. Things like respiratory issues or cardiac complications or even skin and eye allergies. And here's the most worrying part. Children make up almost half of all pollution-linked claims. This is important to note. When you're young, your organs have not completely developed, meaning you're more vulnerable to pollution. So to recap, we have the pollution numbers, we have the pollution impact, and we have the health studies to back it up. So why don't we have a solution? Because of the lack of political will. Because air pollution is still seen as an urban niche issue. You may complain about it, you may protest against it, but will you ever vote based on it? Chances are you won't. If you live in a metro, you'll most likely leave for a short getaway on voting day. And political parties know this. They don't look to solve the air pollution, they simply wait it out. Once winter is gone, so is the smog and so is the conversation around air quality. But do remember this, even if you cannot see it, pollution exists. Delhi's air quality is bad throughout the year. And it's about time we realize that. Because clean air is not a seasonal job. You have to tackle air pollution in the summer, in the monsoon, in the autumn, spring and winter. It's a year-round campaign against a permanent enemy. It was an unusual Thursday in South Korea. Flights were halted, trains and cars slowed down, trading was delayed by 1 hour. Businesses opened late, the army stopped its exercises and the residents gathered on the streets. Do you know why? Because it was exam day in South Korea, the day of the Sunung. This is South Korea's annual college entrance exam. It may sound like a simple affair, but mind you, nothing about it is ordinary. Over 500,000 people sit for this exam every year. For them, it is do or die. At least in the rat race of education, this exam is considered life-defining. It defines which colleges you go to, what jobs you get, how your career takes shape, and even who you marry.
Well, this exam has been a goal to achieve for nearly 20 years of my daughter's life, and it can be another beginning of her life, too. She's studied so much and gone through a lot to get here. I hope she can show everything she's worked for today and get great results.
The exam itself is 9 hours long. It includes questions on maths, history, science, Korean language and English. 9 hours. These questions are prepared for days. A team of professors and high school teachers write them. They come from across the country. These teachers first meet up in a secret location. It's mostly a sparsely populated region of South Korea. They must first surrender their cell phones. Basically, they must be cut off from the world, and then the prep work begins. So a 9-hour-long exam, multiple topics, hundreds of questions, and the whole of South Korea, the entire country coming to a standstill. Imagine the pressure on students. The South Korean education system is already very competitive, both inside and outside school. In 2022, South Koreans spent $20 billion on private education. This is just on tuition and not school fee, $20 billion. And it's just to get a good score in this exam. This would be overwhelming for anyone, so imagine the pressure on teenagers. The fallout is evident and often ugly, especially in teenage depression and suicide rates. They're among the worst in the world. In 2021, South Korea recorded a suicide rate of 26 per 100,000, 26 suicides per 1 lakh people. It's among the highest in the world. Suicide was also one of the main causes of death between those aged 10 and 39. The reason behind this was mental illness. Many blame South Korea's cutthroat competitive education system for this. Here, you either make it or you don't. There's nothing in between. Those who cannot make it often resort to drastic measures. And this culture is not unique to South Korea. Look at China. Every year, millions of Chinese students take the Gaokao. It is called the world's toughest exam, a single test that decides which university you can go to. And in many ways, the life you can lead after that. Families move cities for it. They spend millions on tuition. Some students study for 12, even 14 hours a day. For many, it's not just an exam, it is a national obsession. And here at home in India, we are no strangers to this kind of pressure. Every summer, entire neighborhoods hold their breath for board results. Relatives turn into examiners. Mark sheets become the status symbol. And then come the competitive exams, JEE, NEET, UPSC, CAT, CLAT, each one of these is a battlefield of its own. Students move to coaching hubs like Kota, billboards show the faces of toppers, families believe a single rank can change their fortune, and failure feels like the end of the world. As of May 2025, at least 14 students' suicides were reported in Kota. But it shouldn't be that way. Yes, exams are important. They open doors, they build character, they reward hard work, but they should never define who you are. Because a score cannot measure potential, a degree cannot capture dreams. A failure in one test is not failure in life. India has produced scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, many of whom were never toppers in school. Some even failed their exams, but they found success in their own way. There's more to life than ranks and report cards. There's creativity, courage, character, things that no exam can ever grade. So to every student out there, study hard, give it your best, but do remember your worth is not written in your mark sheet. It is written in who you become after that. Because the real test is life itself. The United States is open again. After 43 days, the government shutdown has officially ended. It was the longest shutdown in US history. Government officials are back at work, and the Trump administration can restart public services. But even now, the disruption is not over. Flight delays may continue for the next few days. Many employees have still not received their salaries. Some essential services were frozen, and key economic data was never gathered during the shutdown, so some reports may never be published. The backlog is massive. From NASA to food safety labs, entire departments were locked down. Also, they finally have a deal to fund the government, but it is only till January, which means 2 months later, another shutdown is very much possible. The crisis may return. So the shutdown may be over, but the uncertainty is not. Here's a report.
This was the moment when Trump ended America's longest shutdown.
And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again.
The United States has reopened. But don't expect a return to normal just yet, because even as federal offices switch their lights back on, the system is still running on delays, disruption, and disorder. The shutdown lasted 43 days. Nearly 1.4 million federal workers were either furloughed or worked without pay. And now they're returning to 6 weeks of unanswered emails, unanswered calls, and unpaid wages. Many still don't know when they'll receive their back pay. It could take days or longer, because most human resource departments were shut down too, and some workers have already left. That's not the only delay. Airports are still under strain. Flight schedules are off balance. The US air traffic control system is short by more than 3,000 controllers. During the shutdown, many simply stopped reporting to work. Some retired, others quit. The result? Long wait times, lingering delays, and a system that may take months or even years to stabilize. Across America, the effects of the shutdown are being felt. At NASA, buildings were padlocked. At the IRS, more than 40 days of unprocessed mail piled up. At the FDA, labs used to detect food contamination were offline. At the Department of Education, over 2,000 discrimination complaints remain unreviewed. At the national parks, some were damaged. Others were cleaned up by volunteers, and safety net programs, like food assistance and energy aid, are only now starting to resume. But even as work resumes, the uncertainty hasn't lifted. The funding deal only covers the government until the end of January. And public confidence in America's institutions, that's already taken a hit. And there's more. The US economy is still flying blind. Key economic reports, like unemployment, inflation, and GDP were delayed. Others may never be released. October's unemployment rate, for example, was never calculated. The data wasn't collected. That means economists, investors, and even the Federal Reserve are operating with missing numbers. Here's how Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell described the situation. What do you do when you're driving in fog? You slow down. And that's exactly what the US Central Bank may be forced to do. Because policy decisions on interest rates, on stimulus, all rely on data. And if that data is distorted or missing, so are the decisions. So while the shutdown has ended, the economic fog remains. Markets may have breathed a sigh of relief. But beneath the surface, the numbers tell a more fragile story. This is the chaos of the world's biggest economy. A system that grinds to a halt every time politics reaches a deadlock. Where workers go unpaid, services go dark, and confidence, at home and abroad, begins to erode. The shutdown is over. But the damage will take far longer to undo, and the countdown to the next crisis has already begun.
Our next story takes us to Europe and to a legal case that has stunned many people. Italy has opened a formal investigation into an allegation from the 1990s. An allegation so dark that prosecutors say they must examine it closely. Well, here's what it says. Rich foreigners paid money to travel into a war zone and shoot at civilians for entertainment. You heard that right. I'll repeat it just in case. Rich foreigners paid money to travel into a war zone and shoot at civilians for entertainment. These people are being called sniper tourists. And when did all of this happen? Almost 30 years ago, during the Bosnian War. Some of you may remember what happened then. The story begins in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia used to be a country. Yugoslavia, the country, was made up of 6 republics. These republics lived under one flag, one government, and one leader, and they stuck to the system for decades. But in the early 1990s, the system collapsed and Yugoslavia broke apart. Old ethnic tensions resurfaced. The Republic of Bosnia declared independence, and that triggered a 3-sided complex conflict. Which were the 3 sides? Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Muslims. They were at war. And it became one of Europe's bloodiest wars. One of the worst tragedies unfolded in Sarajevo. Sarajevo is Bosnia's capital. The city sits in a valley surrounded by hills. In 1992, Bosnian Serb forces captured those hilltops and they turned them into sniper positions. And from these hilltops, they could see every street, every bridge, every person who stepped outside their home. This siege lasted nearly 4 years, from 1992 to 1996. And in this 4-year period, more than 10,000 civilians were killed, many of them by random sniper fire. Now, it is against this history, this backdrop, that the latest allegations must be understood. The claim comes from an Italian writer. His name is Ezio Gavazzeni. He says he spent years collecting statements and testimony, and he says foreigners from wealthy countries were escorted to those sniper positions. They were shown how to handle weapons, and some were reportedly allowed to fire at civilians below. According to some reports, there was even a price list. So what was the price of shooting a human being? $92,000 to $115,000 US. Now, to be clear, none of this has been proven yet, but the prospect itself is chilling. And if true, it would mean civilians were used as targets for money, for entertainment. And it would represent a new and deeply disturbing form of war crime. This is why Italian prosecutors are taking the case so seriously. They're examining whether the allegation involved Italians and whether the claims could lead to murder charges. The author, Gavazzeni, has also referenced a documentary to back his claims. It's a documentary called Sarajevo Safari from 2022. It included statements from a former Serb soldier and a contractor who said that these tourist snipers did come. Reports say a Bosnian intelligence officer has also given testimony. And this is why the allegation strikes such a raw nerve, because it echoes something ancient. History shows that human beings have often treated violence as entertainment. In ancient Rome, elites paid to watch gladiators die. They paid to watch animal hunts. The Bosnia allegation, if true, would be a modern version of that. But not everyone agrees with the allegation. Serbian war veterans say nothing like this happened. No foreigners ever visited their positions. They say it would have been impossible because of checkpoints and tight controls. There were British soldiers too who served in Sarajevo, and they too have denied the claims. Some have described it as an urban myth. And that is what makes this case so complex. The war ended 30 years ago, memories have faded, documents are limited, and much of what happened in the hills was never recorded in the first place. So the real question tonight is not just about proof, it's also about possibility. Could a system of sniper tourism have operated? Could foreigners have reached those hilltop positions without anyone noticing? And if they did, what does that say about the war, about human rights and cruelty, and about the value placed on human life? Before we begin with our final story, let me ask you this. When was the last time you heard the word hypertension and thought of a child? Probably never. Because high blood pressure belongs to adults. Or so we think. Stressful jobs, bad diets, long days, longer commutes. It's a grown-up thing. You would never imagine it in children. Not in 10-year-olds, not in teenagers. But I'm sorry to break it to you. This assumption is flawed. A new study is out and it paints a very different and, may I add, disturbing picture. This is a global review on high blood pressure in children, high BP in children. It says cases in children have almost doubled in the last 20 years. You heard that right, doubled. Look at the numbers. These are numbers of children worldwide with high blood pressure. In the year 2000, it was around 3.2% of all children. That's more than 3 out of every 100 kids with high BP. In 2020, that number rose to more than 6.2%. By 2020, it was 6.2%. This is more than 6 out of every 100 children in the world with high blood pressure. And at a global level, these are not just percentages, they translate into real numbers. We are talking about 114 million children and adolescents living with high blood pressure, 114 million, all under the age of 19. And before we understand why this is happening, we need to understand what this condition really is. What is high blood pressure? In simple words, it means that your heart is working too hard. Blood pushes too forcefully through the veins, the vessels, and over time, it damages your organs. The heart, the kidneys, the brain, all of it. And children usually feel nothing. Nothing you can see. That is why doctors call it the silent killer. Now the question as to why this is happening. Why are children getting a condition that generally belongs to adult life? Experts say the biggest reason is obesity. Nearly 19% of children with obesity have high blood pressure. 19% of obese children have high BP. Among children at a healthy weight, it is less than 3%, and this is a big difference. So obesity is the biggest reason for high blood pressure in kids. The second reason is our lifestyle. Children today are consuming a lot of ultra-processed food, more salt, more sugary drinks. This drives up blood pressure. The third reason is inactivity. Children are spending longer hours on screens and less time in parks, playgrounds, and outdoor activity. When you put all of this together, the pattern you see, the trend you see is not surprising at all. And it is not limited to any one country. It is happening across continents. In fact, here's what a separate study found. Children with high blood pressure had a greater risk of heart problems as adults. Not because of any sudden event, but because of early health patterns that tend to continue over time. So as a parent, what should you do? Here's what experts say. The first step is early detection, of course. Speak to your doctor, check your child's blood pressure once in a while, and work on prevention. Make small changes, such as more exercise, less salt, fewer ultra-processed foods. These are very small, simple, even boring steps, but they can have the strongest long-term impact, because the health patterns of childhood shape adulthood more than we realize. Apple has reinvented the Pocket, and I'm not even kidding. It has introduced the iPhone Pocket. For around $230, you can buy a bag that looks like a sock. It has no zip, no structure, no security, just the Apple tag beside it, which justifies the ridiculous price. And if you think that's crazy, remember, people are actually defending it, because apparently loyalty now comes in nylon in 8 different colors. Take a look.
To build this in a cave with a bunch of scraps.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Pro-Palestinian protesters unfurl a banner on top of Berlin's Brandenburg Gate. Russia's first AI robot falls face down on the stage during its debut appearance, and Botswana hands over 8 cheetahs to India. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1970, Hafez al-Assad seized power in Syria in a bloodless military coup. He replaced his political mentor as Syria's leader. His son, Bashar al-Assad, ruled Syria for 24 years. He was overthrown in a civil war last December, ending the rule of the Assad dynasty in Syria. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.